Hi, this is Andrea Jennings. Welcome to Access for All Integrating Accessibility, where we explore the intersection of pop culture and accessibility. We'll shine a spotlight on those who are opinion leaders in the accessibility world. They are bringing change in this groundbreaking show. So join us each episode as we change the future. It is so good to have you. Your book is the talk of the town. It is the buzz. Everybody loves it. Everybody has it. You want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Yes, it is right here, the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, Smashing Stereotypes, Forging Change, and Building a Disability Inclusive World. And it came out in October last year, and it's currently on its third printing. And it's so surreal being on the other side and having a piece of creative art out in the world
Right.
that is open to everyone's unsolicited opinions and feedback.
Good and bad, right?
Good and bad, but it's being so well received. I love seeing book clubs and discussions happening about the book that from people who may never meet me.
Yeah. I know your book talks about smashing stereotypes, forging change, and building a disability inclusive world. So, first of all, tell me how you got into the world of accessibility, because we're both in that world.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear like your why, your story. So let me know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my entrance into this space comes from my own lived experience. At the age of 9, I was involved in a car accident where my dad was driving. He unfortunately passed away. And I acquired a handful of injuries and disabilities, including permanently paralyzing one of my arms, and much later being diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder, which is a mental health disability. And then I also had a temporary injury. I ended up breaking 2 bones in one of my legs that would leave me as a temporary wheelchair user for about 4 months. And for the decade after I became disabled, decade plus, I want to say, I think I had a lot of internalized shame and internalized stigma and internalized ableism around what it was like to live in this new body and mind. And it wasn't until near the end of my time in college not that I started to explore what would it look like if I felt pride and joy and at a baseline just acceptance of a disability identity, just acknowledging, hey, this impacts how I move about the world. In the last 15 plus years, I have essentially been on this journey of unlearning that internalized shame and unlearning that internalized ableism. So, interestingly enough, disability inclusion and accessibility are different. Accessibility is more the practices that you take to make spaces more accessible. They're more actionable. Disability inclusion is more cultural. So I actually see myself as more on the disability inclusion side than, say, an accessibility expert. So I just wanted to add that nuance in there. But part of why I wrote this book is I started getting questions from people saying, how can I show up better for the disability community? Now you have a 250-page book. There's no one way to show up better for our community. And so I took a look around and I said, the Americans with Disabilities Act is turning 35 this year. We have a policy, a law in place to protect our rights, yet why is our unemployment rate so high? Why are we still, many of us, living in perpetual poverty? Why are we still dehumanized or seen as less than, or even seen as a scapegoat in some ways and blamed when things go wrong, or used as an insult, our disabilities? And I said the attitudes and perceptions are what needs to catch up. So the book is how can we close that gap, because systemic change to me comes from the intersection or the interaction between policy and hearts and minds around a specific topic.
I agree. As you know, I'm multifaceted, hyphenated, right? So when people are like, well, how are you doing filming, and how are you a commissioner, which you used to be one as well, and I'm like, accessibility integrates with everything, right? And so you mentioned disability culture and accessibility. One of the reasons why I really am excited about doing this show is because I'm trying to get the world to see that accessibility integrates with everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and disability is actually the demographic basically intersects with all other demographics, right? And I'm trying to get the people to take the stigma out of accessibility. Now, there are building codes, there are those sorts of things, the built environment structure, but there is an infrastructure in almost everything, like just work related infrastructure, right? Tell me about disability culture and how do you define that for yourself?
Ooh, disability culture to me is, or I guess I'll rewind a little and say, I didn't identify as Taiwanese American until I was 18.
Mm.
And I share that because one of the things I'm learning about being the daughter of Asian immigrants is that I had internalized that my pathway to success and belonging was through assimilation and erasure of my race. And it wasn't until, again, I got to college that I started to find pride and identity, culture, and learn more about Taiwanese history and where my dad came from. And so when I look at disability culture, I kind of look at my own journey of embracing Taiwanese identity and Taiwanese culture in the same way I do disability culture. So disability culture to me is there is history, community, pride and empowerment, art, all different forms of art, joy in this community. And I guess in many ways, I think about even with writing this book, I wanted to bring in so many different community perspectives. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you and I were talking about being at an event recently during the Grammys. And to me, it's the way that we show up for each other in celebration, in solidarity, and also this idea of access intimacy, knowing that our access needs are prioritized and we can show up in a place and not feel like we're the only one and not feel like we're weird. You know, we're just here for each other. We're celebrating, uplifting each other, and we're being in community with one another too.
Yeah, and that's also like a goal of your book, this show, is to let people know that it's like we're not, we don't want you to treat us special. We have our qualifications. We're qualified, right? And we just want people to look at us as humans, and so that we can have a more human-centered world. But tell me about employment in your book. What do you talk about as far as employment, as far as wanting people to hire us? And I think I saw you talk about this in the book, for our value, not because it's making them feel good, because that's actually harmful.
I am starting to see, so I don't know if you know this, but my background is actually in financial services.
We talked about that.
So I started my career in investment banking at Goldman Sachs. I've worked at Bloomberg and in different corporate finance roles and at real estate startups. And I think one of the things was I don't want to be the exception.
Right.
I don't want to be the only disabled person at this bank or the only disabled person at this startup. Yeah. And I bring that up because you talked about the moral imperative. It's a good thing to do. It's the right thing to do to hire disabled people. But now we have research available that shows not only is it a $13 trillion global market as consumers, and also if you include our friends and family, there's also research out there that shows that if you are an employer that champions disability inclusion, you will be more profitable. So we're still existing in capitalism. And I think about the ways that we are some of the most innovative, creative, adaptable people out there who can add so much value to these different workplaces. And part of why I shared kind of a little bit of my own professional history was not to say, hey, look at me, but I will say probably at least once a week I will get a note from someone who also has my injury, also has a paralyzed arm, and maybe they're newer, maybe they recently acquired their disability, and they are just unclear what employment prospects will look like for them.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I've been a banker, I've been a recruiter, I've been a TV producer, I learned how to code, worked in journalism, was a community manager, worked in a sales role. I wasn't that good at the sales role and got fired from it. But I also want to, I want to share that part too, because we're not going to be good at everything.
Yeah.
And so part of the journey is, how can you find what you're good at and lean into that, and find a place that sees value in what you know and know how to do, and will compensate you and support you on that.
Yeah.
And one thing that our mutual friend Terry Hartman Squire says is, it's not just about us finding jobs, it's about us building careers.
Yeah.
And I love that she made that distinction as well, because so much of current disability employment initiatives are focused on getting people jobs. Yes, that's your first step in, but how do you build your career outside of entry level into leadership roles?
I'm glad you talked about that, because I want to talk to you about people being performative. And even though we talked about living in a capitalist society, I'm so happy that you brought those stats up, because it's so important for people to understand our value. But wanting also people to understand that a lot of times they think that certain initiatives don't work because they use it incorrectly. They focus on quotas, like filling that space. And we've never asked for that, right? And so I would love for you to talk about why it's important for people not to be performative. And in the next 4 years plus, in 2025 and beyond, how we are literally qualified individuals. You know, you touched on that a little bit, but it's so important right now when people are saying that because of accessibility or because of certain initiatives, you're not hiring qualified people, when actually we never asked for that. We are qualified.
I guess there are two things that I will respond to that with. And first is, there's this conversation around compliance, ADA compliance. And I think what people forget when they think about the width of the doorway, or whether there's step-free access or having access to captioning and transcripts, is that there are real people who benefit from these. And in some ways, when we overemphasize compliance, we lose the humanity underneath, right? So that was the first thing. And then the second thing I'll say, and it might be a little bit provocative, is if your entrance into this space is performative, what it may also do is create accountability. So maybe you say, hey, we signed up to this pledge that we would put disability inclusion on the board agenda this year. We brought in a speaker to do a workshop. Box checked. But that box was checked and started a conversation that said, what areas of that presentation do we want to deep dive into next year? And one of the fascinating things about this book, the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, is seeing the conversations that people are telling me they're shooting off emails to their team about, hey, have we thought about including, what type of health benefits we're including on our job descriptions, or updating these so that we're taking out nominal requirements that actually aren't required to do this job. So I see the small actions happening, and I don't know if they're performative or not, but what I do know is that there is real disabled talent that is hopefully positively being impacted by these initiatives. And if it is public, which it should be, we can go back and hold these organizations and companies accountable to say, hey, if you said you were going to do this, now it's the next year, or now it's the target year you said you would do this by. Where's the updated data?
So, Tiffany, I love what you just said. This is why we always get along so well. Because what you're saying is, even if someone started out as performative, right? As long as they follow up, and that's such an important aspect, as long as they follow up and they keep diving into doing that task, that at least starts the conversation somewhere, because we're in media a lot, right? And a lot of times I've done some research and I've interviewed some of the recipients of programs. They love the program, but sometimes they're like, but there was no follow-up. So I felt as if they're saying they felt as if they were just there for that moment, like a publicity stunt, and they would have appreciated if someone would have saw how their career is moving forward, you know. So for those who have programs, understand that it wasn't that just that one day, you know, check on those recipients, check on those winners, and follow up. So I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because when you have so many rules, it could scare people away from trying to even start to do the right thing.
Yeah. And I will say, even on a baseline level, you know, if you go to any disability training, they'll say, when in doubt, ask questions.
Yes.
And my asterisk on that is, when in doubt, ask better questions, because saying what's wrong with you and what are your access needs are two questions, and one has a lot of implied negativity and the other one co-creates an accessible environment together.
Yeah.
And so I guess, to build on what you were saying, the idea that, like, at a baseline level, maybe you went to the training, or maybe it was required that you attended the training, but maybe your takeaway was, oh, I want to get more plugged into the disability community. And once you meet more of us, you create friendships, deeper connections and relationships with us. I think you start to care. And, you know, oftentimes I think about, who is saying my name or your name in the rooms and spaces that we're not in? And even the fact that this book is out in the world, this book is out in the world, is the result of my literary agent being in spaces and believing so much in the vision of this, in spaces that many disabled authors may never get access to. And hopefully this helped pave the pathway and open more doors for more disabled authors, and your show opens up pathways for more disabled storytellers.
Thank goodness for Pasadena media. And I tell them all the time, like, people watch the show, they come up to me and they literally say, and I can tell it's not something that they're just trying to say in front of me. They're like, I was really helped by that show. I felt seen and heard. My family gathered and we watched this. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Well, I even remember coming to you right around when the book was coming out, and I said, you know, if we can figure out some way that I can come be a guest on your show,
right.
Shoot your shot.
It worked.
But you were also like, oh, you know, I want to figure out what the angle was. And it took a couple months, but now here we are, right?
Here we are, yeah. And because you are so multifaceted, and here we are just having a conversation about it. You know, I want you to go back to what you were saying earlier about those questions. For those who don't understand, what could be wrong with that question?
Yeah, so I think about it with, is it curiosity that will deepen connection, or is it curiosity that will create more disconnection? So asking someone, so one question I get a lot is, what's wrong with your hand? Underlying that question is, there's something wrong. More broadly, there's something wrong with a disabled body. There's a right and a wrong with how bodies should look, right? Versus a question like, do you need any assistance with that? Or what are your access needs in this space? Is more broad. You know, Keely Cat Wells, and I do mention this in the book, Keely Cat Wells likes the question, what's your story? Versus what's wrong with you, or what's your disability? And what's your story, or even, do you have what you need to fully participate in this? Are both open-ended questions that give you information that you can then take action on. That you then know, hey, if I want to have my friend come join me at dinner, or we go to a concert, I know kind of what to look for, so that we're not experiencing friction when we attend. So it was the launch day of my book, October 8th, and I went to this panel event where Lolo Spencer was there, Ashley Eakin, Nick Novicki, you know, names we
love
all
of
recognize
them.
and love being in community with. And so after they had spoken on their panel, I was having them all take photos with my book.
Oh,
And there
okay.
was someone sitting at the table next to me, and she had pulled up my book on her phone and was getting ready to order it. And she told me that she had a disabled kid and she couldn't wait for her kid to meet us because we were laughing, we were
Right.
having a great time. And I was like, I think that is the possibility and celebration and
Yeah.
joy that we want to impart on this next generation,
Yeah.
right? Our experiences don't have to be, I actually think that part of why ableism continues to be upheld as a system of oppression is by intentionally keeping us isolated so we feel like we have no power.
Yes. And you know what? I want to talk to you before you leave. I really want you to delve into social isolation because we haven't talked about diversibility at your company and why you started it. I think that's such a wonderful reason to. Me too. I also have a spinal cord injury. Well, I have a spinal cord injury. I was a wheelchair user, and when I first acquired my disability, I wanted to go out with my friends, and they were like, "Well, Andrea, we can't go to a restaurant." I'm like, "Well, but why?" And just hearing their stories, because I was a newly disabled person, it really hurt me. But let me know why you started diversibility.
Yeah, so those first 10 plus years after I became disabled, I want to say age 9 until age 21, I was not plugged into a disability community, nor did I even know that a disability community could exist. I didn't know those two words could go together. And after, from my freshman until junior year of college, I co-founded a Taiwanese American club at my university. And that's where I found the pride, empowerment, identity, community in being Taiwanese American. And so my senior year, I said, if I was able to find all of this in being Taiwanese, I wonder what it would look like, and if I could find that around a disability identity. So in 2009, we just celebrated 15 years last year. I started Georgetown's, which is where I went to school, Georgetown University's first ever disability student club. And we started very small, and actually most of my club members were my Taiwanese American peers and did not have disabilities. But we started to grow from there. And up until the time diversibility was still at Georgetown, I think we had like 400 people on our email list at any one point in time, to now growing to over 80,000. And interestingly enough, the inspiration for diversibility back in 2009 came on the heels of me finishing a summer internship in investment banking at Goldman Sachs, which is where I got introduced to a group that they have called the Disability Interest Forum, which is essentially their group for disabled employees and our non-disabled allies. And here I was a summer intern getting introduced to partners at the firm who were part of this group. Partners is like the most senior you can be. Getting mentors and sponsors outside of my immediate investment banking group, people who were going to cheer me on and provide me advice if I, had some career questions or how to navigate a situation. And when I came back from that internship, there was the Taiwanese American Club, but I had seen also, if companies have this too, like, shouldn't universities have this? Shouldn't everyone have this? So after I left Goldman, I went on to Bloomberg, where they were in the nascent stages of creating all of their employee resource groups. So they had an Asian one, and I got to pitch the creation of their disability employee resource group to the chief diversity officer at the time. Now, I worked at Bloomberg 2013 to 2014. So this is over 10 years ago. And I've seen the president of Bloomberg go out on media interviews talking about how proud he is of this group, and seeing some of the people I co-founded this group with go on into leadership roles. And so when I moved out of the corporate world, I said, at every stage of adulthood, from university to these first couple of professional experiences, I have had a disability community. Now that I'm out of those places, where do people who don't work at these large corporations or don't have the infrastructure set up, where do they find community? And one of the things that I learned more recently is that as we think of our overall well-being, it's the intersection between our physical health, our mental health, and our social health. And social health is community, relationships, having access to social connection. And if I think about, again, coming back to the disability community, we are some of the most isolated and excluded groups out there, not because we choose to be, but inaccessible infrastructure, having to commute to a place or not having access to the transportation to get there. And that's why I feel really excited that we became digital natives right around this coming of age moment into adulthood, where now we have social media and online communities to find each other. So if you don't have access to those communities physically in the spaces that you are, you can go online and find that community as well. And I've made so many online friends, and maybe we were friends online first before we met in person. So that to me was the genesis of Diversability. Today we're over 80,000 in our ecosystem across social media and some closed community groups that we have, and membership groups. But it's also, these are all people who have opted in to be part of a disability community. And during the pandemic, since the start of the pandemic, we've grown 4 times, which also showed me that we're going to need community in whatever form. And even as we think about the next 4 years, and many people feeling potentially despair or hopelessness around certain executive orders and actions that are being made, is we find healing and solidarity and power in community. And we may not build as loudly as we were before, or hopefully we're still loud, but we're still doing that work quietly. It doesn't need to be plastered visibly everywhere. And I guess to also contradict myself, like, when one of us shines, we all shine brighter too, right? So I hope that we'll just have some people who still will continue to be loud and some people who are quietly doing the work. And this is how the disability community has always existed, right? Now we're just making it a little bit easier to find each other.
Yeah, I love that. And so, and I'm looking directly at the world. This woman is qualified. This is not a diversity hire or something like that. She's qualified. I just want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your story, sharing your why, and uplifting and basically giving us a voice at your workplace with Diversability, with your amazing book, the Anti-Ableist Manifesto. Everybody loves this book, you guys. So you are, and really not just because you're my friend, you are doing really wonderful things out there. So thank you, as a member of the disability community. Thank you for elevating our culture through media, through your social media posts, your show. What is your social media show called again?
It's called the Anti-Ableism series.
The
Very similar.
Anti-Ableism series. How did I not know that? So yes, her social media show is called the Anti-Ableism series. How many
Parts?
Yeah.
Over 300 parts, and
Wow.
and you'll actually see a lot of the parts referenced in the book. And I like having guests on, so you may see Andrea on a future part of the Anti-Ableism series.
She wanted me to be on her show, but she hadn't got me. I mean, she wanted to be on this show, but I hadn't been on her show just yet. So we're gonna switch.
Cross-collaborate.
Yes, we're gonna do that today. So again, it was so nice to have you here. And the next event that we go to, we'll have more to talk about. So yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I hope you learned something today watching Access for All Integrating Accessibility, where we dive deep into the subject of accessibility beyond and above compliance.